If you're watching this, make sure you hit like, comment, and subscribe because tonight's story isn't just about a hunt. It's about what happens when hunters become the hunted. The galaxy thought it had seen monsters. Was wrong. Now let's begin. The mercenary frigate Vorn's Pride drifted through the fog of a dying nebula, its hull scarred from years of profitable violence. Inside, the air smelled of oil, ozone, and the kind of fear that only men who'd killed too often carried on their breath. Around the central holidable stood 5 figures, each more dangerous than the next, watching the projection of their next quarry flicker in pale blue light. A blur of muscle, claws, and motionless eyes appeared in the hollow scan. The system labeled it, Apex Entity, Unclassified. 80 million credits, Corvash said, his voice low and sharp. He was tall, scaled, and carved from the kind of discipline that turns instinct into precision. A reptilian from the Drac Dominion, his cold yellow eyes measured risk the way others measured oxygen. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary. Either way we end it. Velik laughed, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Alive? You want to cage that thing? I'd rather share a bed with a plasma grenade. Across the table, Ziritha's cybernetic arms flexed, servos whining. The brute's bulk filled half the room. We've taken worse. Talik, the insectoid tracker, twitched his antennae toward the display. Not worse. Not like this. The pattern is unnatural. It kills without hunger. Arranges its kills. As if studying them. The youngest of them, Dran, barely out of his second decade, human by birth but hardened by war, shifted uncomfortably. He'd heard the rumors. Entire platoons erased. Cities gone dark. The apex predator wasn't supposed to be real. But every mercenary in the galaxy knew one rule. If a bounty paid this high, something was real enough to die for it. Their ship entered orbit around Thalxus 9, a frozen wasteland wrapped in storms so dense even radar trembled. The last transmission from this sector had come from a research outpost now marked as abandoned. No survivors. No explanation. Just silence. As the frigate descended, the viewports filled with an ocean of white. Cracked glaciers and skeletal forests stretched across the horizon, twisted black shapes rising from ice like frozen screams. Thermal readings? Corvash asked. Talik's antennae quivered. Minimal. One large heat source, stationary. Deep within the storm sector. Could be our target, Velik muttered. Or bait. Either way, said Kor, checking the charge on his plasma rifle, we'll find out. They landed on the ice with a low groan of metal. The door hissed open and the storm greeted them with a roar, a wind so cold it felt alive. Snow whipped across their armor, clinging to the seals like ash. Their visors adjusted to the wideout, painting faint outlines where motion sensors picked up shapes in the distance. Dran followed last, his rifle shaking slightly in his grip. He caught himself staring at the horizon, at the way the light bent and shimmered, as if something enormous had moved beneath the snow. Keep tight, Kor ordered. We moved to the outpost. No stray signals. They advanced in formation through the desolate tundra. The storm swallowed their words, leaving only the hiss of static in their comms. After an hour, the wreckage of the research station came into view, half buried, walls torn outward, metal twisted like cloth. Zirith pushed through the entrance, scanning. No life signs. Just residue. Dran stepped closer, his boots crunching on frost-covered glass. The walls were covered in deep, gouging claw marks, long, ragged, inside out. Velik frowned. Something was trying to get out of here. Kor's tail flicked once, a sign of thought. Then something put it in. The outpost interior was a tomb. Frozen equipment, shattered lights, a data core flickering weakly in the corner. Talik interfaced with it, claws tapping rapidly. Logs corrupted. But there's a voice file. One left intact. Play it, Kor said. A woman's voice filled the room, crackling, desperate. If anyone finds this, don't hunt it. Remembers. It learns. It took the shape of what we fear most. The rest dissolved into static, ending on a scream that cut straight through the storm outside. Silence followed. Even Velik didn't joke this time. Zirith turned toward the doorway, sensors humming. Movement. 30 meters east. They fanned out instantly, weapons raised. The snow drifted, thick and silent, as shadows moved between the broken structures. A shape passed across Dran's scope, fast, impossibly fast. He fired. The blast lit the night in a burst of blue, but the target was gone before the beam even hit. Negative contact, Dran said, breathing hard. It's playing with us. Kor didn't respond. He crouched by the ice, studying something glinting faintly beneath a layer of frost. He brushed it aside and froze. It was a helmet. Human design. Scarred, burnt, years old. Inside, the visor had been ripped open by something with surgical precision. Humans? Velik hissed. Out here? Impossible. Kor straightened, his voice flat. Not impossible. Just unlucky. The wind howled through the ruins again, louder now, carrying with it a low, guttural sound that didn't belong to any species known to the Galactic Concord. It wasn't a roar. It was a warning. Zirith raised his cannon toward the dark. We engage or retreat? Kor didn't look away from the snow. We follow the blood. This is what we came for. Dran hesitated. The blood trail led away from the outpost, disappearing into the storm like a wound carved across the land. His instincts screamed to turn back, but his feet followed the others. In this line of work, fear was a luxury. They marched until their lights dimmed and the world became a blur of white noise and static. The readings flickered again. Motion, then nothing. Heartbeats spiked across the squad comms. Then, as if the storm itself inhaled, everything went still. Talik's voice came through, a whisper, "It's watching us." A single drone camera caught it for less than a second. A towering shape, half shadow, half metal, crouched in the snow. Then static devoured the feed. Velik cursed. I didn't even see it move. Kor turned toward the team, eyes narrow and reptilian. This isn't a beast. It's strategy. It's intelligence. The snowstorm swelled around them, swallowing their words. Dran stared into the blizzard, his pulse hammering. For just a heartbeat he thought he saw eyes staring back, pale, unblinking, human. The wind screamed across the ice like laughter. Kor lowered his rifle slightly, voice quiet but sure. If the creature's not trapped in there, he nodded toward the outpost, then where the hell is it now? The answer came as a distant roar that rolled across the tundra, shaking the air, echoing off the metal hull of Vorn's Pride far behind them. It was not the sound of prey. It was the sound of something very large and very close, claiming its territory. And it was coming their way. The storm had worsened overnight, turning the air into a living thing that clawed at their armor and blurred every motion sensor. The mercenaries trudged through the blinding white, their visors lit by flickering HUDs that spat warnings faster than they could read them. The apex predator's trail was faint, thermal residue scattered across kilometers of frozen wasteland, but it was enough to keep Kor Vash moving. He wasn't the kind of hunter who turned back. Dran lagged slightly behind, his breath fogging the inside of his visor. The others moved like machines, driven by greed, pride, or the kind of numb hunger that money couldn't cure. But Dran felt something else pressing in with the cold, an instinct older than civilization. The sense that they were being studied. Talik clicked his mandibles, checking the scanner built into his forearm. Movement patterns irregular. It circles always just beyond range. It's testing us, Kor replied. His scaled fingers rested lightly on the trigger of his rifle. Predators test before they strike. Zirith grunted. So do soldiers. Velik snorted. You're giving this thing too much credit? It's just meat with claws. The galaxy loves its ghost stories. No one answered. Ahead, the storm thinned enough to reveal a break in the ice. The remains of a downed Thalxus patrol ship lay scattered across the snowfield, hull panels bent like tin foil, bodies half buried beneath a thin sheet of frost. Kor raised a fist. The team halted. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn. The corpses were arranged in a spiral, deliberate, symmetrical. Blood had frozen into dark lines connecting each body to the next, forming a pattern that made no sense to any of them. Dran swallowed hard. Who would do this? Not who, Talik murmured. What? This is mimicry. It's copying ritual behavior. Trying to understand it. Velik kicked a piece of frozen metal aside, forcing a laugh that didn't sound convincing. Or maybe it's just making a mess. You're all reading poetry into teeth marks. Kor crouched beside one of the bodies, his claws tracing the puncture wounds. No teeth marks. Punctures, uniform, surgical. This wasn't feeding. This was analysis. Dran glanced over the field again. It's learning from them? Kor looked up, eyes glinting. Maybe it's learning from us. A burst of static interrupted them. Ziritha's heavy voice crackled through the comms. Sensors tripped. Southridge. Big. Fast. They moved into formation automatically, rifles ready. The wind carried faint sounds, crunching ice, the subtle rhythm of something moving low to the ground, circling. Dran's pulse spiked. Through the snow he caught a flicker, 2 points of reflected light like eyes watching through the haze. He blinked and they vanished. Velik lifted his rifle and fired a pulse into the direction of the movement. The beam cut a line through the fog and hit nothing. "Stop wasting ammo," Kor barked. "It's using the storm for cover. Wants us to panic." Ziritha's voice came again, lower now. Motion stopped. "It's gone." "No," Talik whispered, antennae trembling. "Not gone. Closer." Before anyone could react, a drone above them screamed static and went dark. The others followed, blinking out one by one until only snow and silence remained. Kor adjusted his visor. "Talik, get me a thermal sweep." The tracker's claws tapped his console. "It's everywhere. All around. Temperature fluctuating, 30 degrees up, then gone. It's masking itself." "Impossible," Velik muttered. Ziritha's mechanical arms rotated, cannon spinning up with a hum that vibrated through the ice. "I'm done waiting. Whatever it is, we flush it out." He unleashed a barrage into the nearest ridge, plasma bolts melting snow and rock alike. The blast echoed for kilometers. For a moment there was only silence. Then something screamed, high, alien, and furious. The sound hit them like a shockwave, a frequency that bypassed hearing and went straight into the bones. Dran stumbled, clutching his helmet. When he looked up, he saw movement above them, a blur racing along the cliffs, too fast to track. "It's toying with us," Velik shouted. "Hold positions," Kor commanded. "Talik, recalibrate." A shape exploded out of the fog behind them. Zirith turned just in time to see claws rake across his chest plate, sparks bursting as metal screeched. The creature vanished again before the others could aim. Zirith staggered back, armor smoking, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you get a look?" Kor demanded. Ziritha's voice came out rough. Tall. Bipedal. But the movement, it wasn't random. It struck low, aimed for weak points. That was trained behavior. Kor's tail lashed once, the only sign of tension he allowed. Then it's not an animal. It's something worse. They regrouped under a jagged overhang, wind howling around them. The team's confidence had begun to crack. Dran saw it in their movements. Velik's nervous twitch, Talik's constant scanning, Ziritha's trembling servos. Even Kor's calm felt too still, too deliberate. Dran stepped closer to him. "Sir, this thing, it knew where to hit. Maybe we should pull back, gather data?" "We came for a bounty," Kor interrupted. "We leave with a body. Or we don't leave." Dran hesitated. "You really think the credits are worth it?" Kor turned his gaze on him. "It's not about the credits. It's about control. Things like this remind the galaxy that the food chain isn't finished. That's bad for business." The wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic scent, blood and ozone. Talik's antennae flared. New trail. Eastward. They followed it across a ravine, moving carefully over the ice. The path ended at a cave mouth half buried in snow, glowing faintly from within. Kor motioned for silence. They entered. Inside, the walls glistened with frozen condensation and strange markings, scratched lines that looked almost like language. Piles of bones lay scattered in neat rows. Each skull had a small hole drilled in the forehead, as if something had extracted whatever it wanted from inside. Dran swallowed. "What kind of mind does this?" Kor stared at the carvings, his breath steaming. "One that's evolving." From deeper within the cave came a faint light, orange, warm, unnatural in the ice. They moved closer until they saw it flickering through the tunnel ahead. Fire. Someone was burning fuel down there, carefully maintaining it. And beside the fire, shadows moved, large, deliberate, humanoid. Dran's heart stuttered. "There's someone else here." Kor gestured for silence and motioned forward. The others raised their weapons and advanced, steps slow, precise. As they neared the mouth of the chamber, the faint crackle of fire grew louder, joined by the sound of quiet breathing, steady, human. Then a voice, deep and calm, drifted out through the dark. "You shouldn't have come here." Every weapon lifted instantly, barrels aimed toward the firelight. Dran froze where he stood. The figure by the flames turned slightly, and the fire reflected off human skin, human eyes. Behind him, in the shadows, something immense moved, its golden gaze fixed on the intruders. And for the first time since they'd landed, even Kor Vash felt the cold crawl down his spine. The fire cast a trembling glow across the ice chamber, painting the walls in flickering shades of amber and shadow. The man who sat beside it looked like something the galaxy had forgotten. Rugged, bearded, his uniform faded beyond recognition. His eyes, gray as old steel, studied the mercenaries with the calm of someone who had seen death and found it unimpressive. "Drop your weapons," he said, his voice low but steady. You don't need them here. No one moved. 5 rifles remained trained on him, their beams crossing in the cold air. Vash stepped forward, his scaled claws flexing. Identify yourself. The man didn't flinch. He reached into the fire with bare fingers, adjusted a burning log and leaned back again. Name's Elias Ward. Terran Defense Corps. Or what's left of it. Dran's breath caught. Human? That's impossible. Terra collapsed decades ago. Elias gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Didn't stop me from breathing. Behind him, in the shadows, something massive stirred. The mercenaries froze as the apex predator shifted into the firelight. Its form was nightmarish and beautiful, muscular, sinewed, covered in faint metallic plating that caught the light like armor. 2 golden eyes fixed on them, not with animal rage but with deliberate awareness. Velik took a step back. Kor, it's right there. Hold position, Kor ordered, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. Elias placed a hand on the creature's flank. It relaxed instantly, exhaling a deep, almost human sigh. The gesture was intimate, familiar. You tracked it for the bounty, Elias said quietly. That was your first mistake. Kor's gaze hardened. We came for the beast. Not for a conversation. Then you're going to die talking, Elias replied. The silence that followed pressed against the walls. The fire popped, throwing sparks. Dran couldn't look away from the creature. It was enormous, easily 3 meters tall when upright, yet it sat like a trained guard dog, every muscle waiting for a command that never came. Zerith's cannon arm twitched. What is it? A weapon. Elias looked at him. It was the apex of genetic engineering, built to fight wars its makers couldn't win. And you, Kor said, circling slightly, you control it? Elias's smile turned cold. No one controls it, but it listens to me. That's more than I can say for most sentient beings. Velik spat into the snow. This thing wiped out entire colonies. You expect us to believe you've tamed it? Elias's eyes narrowed. Tamed? You think I chained it? No. I found it dying. Half burned, half mad. The labs that made it wanted perfection but forgot mercy. It wasn't hunting, it was escaping. Dran stepped forward slightly. So you helped it? I fed it, taught it. It learned language faster than I could speak it. It understands pain, loyalty, hunger. Elias's gaze flicked toward Kor. Probably understands more than your crew does. Kor's tail twitched in irritation. It's still a weapon. And weapons are valuable. Elias's tone dropped to something sharp. That's exactly what killed the ones who made it. They saw a weapon. Not a mind. Talik's antennae quivered. Then what is it now? Elias looked at the creature with something like affection. A survivor. Same as me. Kor gestured for his men to fan out. Enough sentiment. We take them both. Corporate labs will pay double for a specimen with intact neural bonds. Elias stood slowly. The creature rose with him, towering, its eyes burning gold. The air thickened with tension. Dran's hands tightened on his rifle, but something inside him resisted pulling the trigger. The creature's gaze didn't carry malice. It carried understanding. You don't get it, Elias said softly. It's not the one you should fear. Zerith sneered. We've faced worse. Elias shook his head. Not worse. Smarter. In one motion, the creature vanished into the shadows. The merc spun, scanning. Sensors flickered, readings spiking off the scale. The fire dimmed under the draft of its movement. Velik cursed. Where did it go? Where it always goes, Elias murmured. Where it can see every way you'll die before you take another step. A low growl echoed through the chamber. Not animal, strategic. Like sound meant to herd them. Kor steadied himself. You think this scares us, human? We're hunters. Elias's eyes met his. So was I. Until I realized there's nothing left worth hunting. The firelight caught on his face then, old scars across his cheek, the mark of a soldier who'd survived too much. He looked like a ghost wearing flesh. Dran lowered his weapon slightly. You could have killed us already. Why haven't you? Because I don't kill for sport, Elias said. And it doesn't kill without reason. You haven't given it one yet. For a moment no one spoke. The storm outside howled through cracks in the ice and the cave lights flickered. Kor's mind worked behind unblinking eyes, calculating angles. You want to protect it, he said finally. Why? Elias glanced toward the tunnel where the creature had disappeared. Because it's the last good thing left in this universe that still knows what gratitude means. Velik barked a bitter laugh. You think it's grateful? It's a beast. Elias didn't respond. Instead, he looked at Dran, the only human among the mercs. "What do you think?" Dran hesitated. "I think..." He looked toward the shadows where he'd seen those eyes. "I think maybe we've been tracking the wrong monster." The tension cracked like glass. Velik raised his weapon, fury bubbling. "Enough of this. I'm done playing therapist." Kor raised a hand, stopping him. "No. He's right about one thing. This isn't about Beast. It's about who's in control. You and your pet think you can threaten professionals?" Elias sighed. "You came here believing you were the hunters. That's your second mistake." Zerithus cannon whirred as he aimed. "And the third?" Elias stepped back toward the fire, his shadow merging with the glow. "Coming in numbers too small to bury your dead." The ground trembled. A roar filled the chamber, closer, louder than before. Something hit the walls hard enough to send ice raining down. Kor barked orders, but his words were drowned out by the sound of claws tearing through stone. The creature burst back into the light, its movement too fast to follow, a blur of muscle and purpose. It didn't attack, it positioned itself between Elias and the mercs, head low, daring them to take another step. Elias's voice cut through the chaos. "You have one chance. Leave your weapons and go. If you stay, you'll learn what real predators look like." No one moved. Every instinct screamed at them to fire, but something ancient in their blood held them still. The kind of fear that didn't come from training or logic, something deeper, ancestral. Kor's eyes narrowed. "You can't protect him forever." Elias smiled faintly. "Forever's not the goal. Survival is." Outside, thunder rolled across the frozen valley. Inside the cave, firelight reflected off gold eyes and human resolve. Two hunters, man and monster, united by the same truth: everything hunts something. And tonight, the galaxy's best-paid killers had just found out what it felt like to be prey. The calm of the cave shattered when the storm outside carried unfamiliar sounds, low, mechanical, and deliberate. Through the cracks in the ice, glints of metal reflected the firelight, and the mercenaries realized instantly, they were not alone. Another team had tracked them. Rivals, seasoned hunters, alien soldiers with a reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness. Kor Vash growled under his breath, claws flexing. "They followed our signal. Professional amateurs, thinking the credit belongs to them." Velik cursed, tightening his grip on his rifle. "And they didn't even bother to announce themselves. Typical." Elias, calm as ever, crouched slightly, one hand brushing the massive flank of the apex predator. "Then this isn't just about survival anymore. It's a test of loyalty." The first intruder appeared, a bipedal alien with segmented armor, weapons aimed, scanning for threat. Behind it, a dozen more moved in silence, their formation disciplined, each step calculated to intimidate. Kor's tail twitched. "Position yourselves. They want the kill? They'll get it." The chamber became a battlefield almost instantly. Plasma bolts lanced across the icy walls, carving sparks and smoke into the air. The fire flickered and guttered as the predator moved with impossible speed, intercepting shots and striking at limbs with surgical precision. Every movement was measured, efficient, terrifying. Dran stayed close to Elias, watching the dance of fury and strategy. The creature wasn't just fighting, it was teaching, corralling, controlling the battlefield. It moved like a living weapon, guided by Elias' quiet commands. Velik fired blindly at a flanking intruder, but the alien twisted mid-air, dodging as if it anticipated the shot. Zerithus' cannon whined, booming into the attackers, but even his firepower seemed less precise than the predator's simple, brutal instinct. One of the rivals lunged toward Elias, blade raised. Dran hesitated, then saw the predator intercept with a single swipe of its claw, knocking the alien aside without even breaking its stride. The predator's eyes met Elias for a fraction of a second, a communication only they could read. Dran's chest tightened. He realized then that the human and the creature operated on the same wavelength, a bond forged in silence and survival. The apex predator was not tamed, it was allied. Kor barked orders, but even he faltered when another rival attempted to flank Zerith. The predator pivoted, massive legs coiling like springs, and smashed the alien into the ice. Sparks and frozen snow erupted. Velik stumbled backward, cursing as he realized the battle was no longer predictable. "You see now," Elias said, voice calm even as the chaos swirled, "why I told you the hunters were the hunted." A hail of plasma erupted from the entrance, forcing the mercenaries to duck. Kor's calculated plans unraveled as intruders surged, pressing from multiple angles. Dran, seeing a young alien soldier aim for Elias, acted instinctively, tackling the target into the wall. Pain seared through him as a shard of ice cut his arm, but he didn't release. The predator moved like a shadow across the battlefield, intercepting attacks, using the environment as leverage. It didn't waste energy, it punished mistakes. Every misstep from the rival hunters, every overreach was exploited. Corvash's voice cut sharply through the din. Fall back. Consolidate. Too late. Several of his team had already been wounded, the effectiveness of their tactics crumbling under the predator's relentless precision. Dran dragged a bleeding Zirith to cover as the firelight danced across jagged ice shards. Velik yelled over the chaos. It's not just fighting. It's thinking. Everything it does has a purpose. Yes, Elias said almost as an aside, and every purpose protects those who matter. The rival hunters realized too late that the predator was hurting them. Their formations collapsed as one after another was incapacitated, disarmed, or thrown off balance by the creature's sheer power. One intruder tried to retreat, but the predator anticipated, cutting off escape with a forceful swipe, leaving them sprawled across the ice. Corvash, seeing the carnage, gritted his teeth. His calculated plan, his years of experience, everything unraveled in front of him. The apex predator moved like an extension of Elias himself, the bond between man and monster transforming the battlefield into a trap for any who challenged them. Dran's breath came hard, fogging his visor as he took in the scene. This was more than survival. This was mastery not of a weapon but of instinct, loyalty, and strategy. Humans were not weak. Humans were adaptable, relentless, and in Elias' case terrifyingly efficient. Velik's howl of frustration echoed through the chamber as a rival lunged at him, only to be intercepted by the predator's massive paw. Zirith, bleeding, scrambled to assist Velik, but the creature was everywhere at once, a blur, a perfect predator. Finally, the last intruder fell, incapacitated and broken, sprawled across the ice. The cave was silent again, save for the crackle of fire and the labored breathing of the survivors. Elias approached the center of the chamber, dragging Dran slightly away from the fallen mercenaries. The apex predator sank to its haunches beside him, eyes flicking between the human and the mercenaries with quiet assurance. Corvash, shaken but still defiant, studied Elias. You've turned your weapon against every professional in this sector, and survived. Why not strike the rest of us? Elias's gaze was steady. Because this isn't about killing for sport. This is about teaching. You came for a bounty. You tracked something you didn't understand. You thought it was prey. Dran's hands were still shaking, rifle lowered. And now, Elias said softly, you decide whether you leave with knowledge or die with arrogance. The cave was still, the only sounds the crackling fire and the soft exhale of the predator. Corvash and his remaining team shared a glance, defeat, uncertainty, and perhaps the faintest hint of respect. Outside, the storm howled, carrying the faint scent of blood and ozone. Within, man and monster stood together, a bond unspoken yet unmistakable. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of a reckoning it didn't see coming. Dran swallowed hard, glancing at Elias and the creature. I think I understand now. It's not just the apex predator. The human. You're what makes it dangerous. Elias nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the fallen rivals. The apex predator isn't the threat. Humanity is. At least when it refuses to be controlled. Corvash's tail twitched once in irritation and contemplation. He stepped back, evaluating. Then we retreat, for now. The firelight danced across the predator's golden eyes. In that moment, the mercenaries understood. The creature wasn't merely a weapon. It was a reflection of its human companion, intelligent, loyal, and unstoppable when provoked. As the storm outside intensified, Elias and his partner in survival stood silently, waiting, knowing the galaxy would come again. And when it did, they would be ready. The cave fell into a tense quiet, the weight of what had just occurred pressing down on the mercenaries like the frozen wind outside. Every instinct screamed that leaving alive was only a temporary reprieve. Out there, the galaxy was vast, and the apex predator had allies none of them had anticipated. The hunters had been hunted, and now the balance had shifted. The cave was silent, save for the distant howl of the Thalxus 9 storm and the occasional drip of melting ice. The battlefield had been reduced to shattered weapons, scorched ice, and the hollow, ragged breathing of the survivors. Dran knelt beside the body of Zirith, checking for signs of life, his hands trembling despite the cold. The brute's servos had been shattered beyond repair, and Dran pressed a makeshift field bandage across the severed arm. He could feel the weight of failure pressing against him, But Elias's calm presence reminded him there was still a choice: survive or become just another corpse frozen into the wasteland. Elias tended to the fire, methodical, almost ritualistic, as if each movement grounded him in a world that had long since abandoned reason. His eyes flicked to Dran, sharp and assessing. The galaxy doesn't reward hesitation. You held your nerve. That's rare for someone your age. Dran swallowed, nodding. Thank you, sir. I thought we were done for. Elias's gaze softened slightly. Most are before they even realize it. You have potential. But remember this: the apex predator isn't just muscle and reflex. It's instinct guided by intelligence. That bond we share? That's the difference between survival and extinction. From the shadows, the predator's golden eyes shifted toward Dran. The massive form exhaled slowly, a sound that carried weight far beyond its size. It stepped closer, circling him with the careful patience of a teacher rather than a predator. Dran felt the ground beneath him tremble slightly with each movement. Despite the danger, he sensed no hostility, only appraisal. Velik, limping slightly, dragged himself up to lean against a fractured wall. I can't believe it. That thing listens to a human? Not listens, Elias corrected. Understands. Partners. Allies. Something most of the galaxy will never comprehend because they think survival is measured in firepower. Korvash stepped back, observing the firelight reflecting off the predator's plated muscles. His tail lashed against the wall in irritation, but his voice was steady. So what now? You've proven your dominance. What stops you from killing us anyway? Elias stood slowly, his silhouette strong against the glow of the fire. Because killing isn't the point. The point is choice. You came to hunt, to claim, to dominate. And you were shown you are not the apex. Learn or die trying. Those are your options. Dran watched the predator nudge Elias' side, a soft, almost affectionate gesture. How did you even come to trust it? He asked. Elias's gaze went distant, the weight of memory in his tone. Years ago I found it injured, left for dead by the very hands that created it. I had no reason to help, no resources, and the galaxy had forgotten me. But I couldn't leave it. I didn't tame it, I offered survival, guidance, patience. And it chose to stay. In that choice we both survived. The predator lowered its massive head, its gaze sweeping across the remaining mercenaries. Kor, ever analytical, noted the subtle language, the creature's body tense, aware, not defensive, not aggressive. It was a partnership, a unit forged in mutual respect. Outside, the storm had intensified, a perfect camouflage for departure or defense. Elias surveyed the frozen landscape through the cave mouth, calculating their next move. We leave soon. The galaxy will come again, and next time, it won't be a mere curiosity. They'll send armies. But that's fine, we'll be ready. Dran glanced at the battered mercenaries beside him, the survivors of a team that had come with arrogance and left with awe. He realized then that the apex predator was not a tool, nor was Elias a typical soldier. They were a force, human and predator intertwined, intelligent, adaptive, and lethal in ways the galaxy had never measured. Velik straightened painfully, eyes still wide. You're saying, we're alive because of it? Because of you. Yes, Elias said simply. And because survival isn't about the weapon you carry. It's about understanding what you fight and, more importantly, what fights for you. The ground beneath the cave trembled again, a low rumble. Dran froze, sensing not threat but movement. From the shadows, the predator stepped forward, taller, imposing, exuding power and purpose. It nudged Dran gently, then retreated to Elias' side, ready for what came next. Kor exhaled slowly, calculating. I don't know if I can respect this alliance. But I can't deny it. We lose if we don't retreat. Elias nodded. Live and carry this lesson. The universe doesn't bend to arrogance. It responds to understanding. Dran helped the remaining mercenaries to their feet, scanning the horizon. The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly, jagged cliffs and glaciers etched with scars of storms past. The apex predator stepped outside first, massive feet imprinting deep tracks in the snow. Elias followed, confident, silent, carrying the weight of every choice he had made, every life he had saved, every enemy who had underestimated him. For a moment time seemed to pause. The storm raged around them, wind howling, ice tearing against the rocks. And in that fury there was clarity. The hunters had been hunted, and the apex had chosen its human. They were no longer prey, they were a unit, unstoppable, undaunted by the galaxy's underestimation. Dran's eyes swept the horizon, catching the faint shimmer of movement far off in the distance. scouts, perhaps, or more hunters. He raised his hand slightly. They're coming back. But this time we'll be ready. Elias glanced at him, voice calm but firm. They always come back. The difference is next time they'll remember who hunts and who survives. The predator growled softly, almost a purr, rubbing against Elias' leg. Dran understood in that instant the depth of the bond, human and predator, instinct and intelligence, united. This was more than survival. This was mastery. Corvash and the remaining mercenaries took their leave quietly, recognizing defeat, restraint, and the unmistakable force of what they had faced. Even Velik muttered a begrudging acknowledgement. Dran, limping slightly with his own injuries, followed Elias and the predator out of the cave. They emerged into the storm, silhouettes against the pale light of Thalxis IX's twin moons. The wind whipped around them, cold and merciless, but the pair moved with purpose, stride matched to stride, predator and human. Every step left a mark in the snow, footprints that told a story of loyalty, survival and power beyond measure. Elias looked back once, golden eyes of the apex predator glinting in the firelight of the cave. "Remember this," he said. "The apex isn't always the strongest. It's the one who adapts, who learns and who chooses its allies wisely." Dran felt something shift in him, a spark of understanding, respect and awe. He had seen the apex, not in legend, not in rumor, but alive and reasoning, guided by a human mind unbroken by the galaxy's cruelty. And as the storm swallowed them, the cave fading behind their silhouettes, one truth echoed in Dran's mind: the galaxy hunts endlessly, but the human who learns to survive alongside the impossible becomes unstoppable. The wind roared around them, carrying with it a promise. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. And the universe, for all its predators, had yet to reckon with what a human and an apex predator could achieve together.